Okay, we are going once, going twice. Sold to the fellow online, lady online, logging in. So we're going to get started here shortly. And tour's wrapping up. You can't really see it, the screen's blocking you. Once people settle in, we'll get started in earnest, talking about how timber trusses work and affect home style. How they work and how they affect home style. And when we're done with this, even if you stick around only for the first 20 minutes, you will have a working knowledge of trusses that many framers, builders do not know about how trusses work. It's just a matter of stopping to think about it and understand it. It's not that deep. We're going to demonstrate right here with two volunteers. Okay, and so, and then if you've got any particular questions as we're going through the talk here, Lucas is going to be monitoring the chat, so you'll be able to partake that way. And even in the Q&A after, you'll be able to partake of that. And just a little bit of trivia. One thing that I'm going to cover in the Q&A is how to make a truss without the easiest way to make a truss without having to use big metal straps for a tension load. And there's a traditional truss that has been used time and time again, and I'm going to share that with you in the Q&A. So what else? So tension loading, just a little heads up with trusses. Tension loading is the Achilles heel of a truss. Whether it's a metal truss, a wooden truss, whatever it is, tension loading is where joints try to pull apart. And that is actually the same for any structure in the world. A bridge, a skyscraper, whatever it is, the tension loads generally are where they fail. That's the Achilles heel. Okay, we're getting closer here. Should I call him in? Yeah. Josh, paging Josh, we have audience online. Josh, paging Josh, we have an audience online. As soon as you can wrap it up. Okay. Yeah, so what we got going on is there's a pretty cool project over there. So the script extended for Josh giving the live tour, and he's just finishing up. So we're gonna get people seated and get rolling here pretty quick. Yeah, please comment and share, and give Lucas a question right now. We have a little bit of time. Anything that's on your mind, give it a little comment, jump on. Yeah, we're gonna really knock this out of the park here. Mm-hmm. What else? So here's a little bit of trivia. When builders of old could get nails, the pegs were available, when they could get nails, where do you suppose they used those precious nails they got their hands on? It was back in the day. Hand forged nails, blacksmith would make them on a forge, bang, 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 bang. Where do you suppose they used the nails? And the answer might be kind of surprising, but then when you think about it, it's kind of makes sense. If you could get your hands on nails, that meant that you were driving a Tesla or an exotic sports car. I mean, that's a sign of wealth. So where are you going to put the wealth in a building? Where are you going to display that? The front door. Yep. That's where it's at. So that's kind of a interesting topic. When I first heard that piece, I was thinking, what kind of tension loading, something to address tension loading or something like that where it makes it easier. But no. Okay, our audience is filing in. We will get started here in a bit. How was it? How was the tour, folks?
Great.
Awesome. Cool. Now, if any of you like, there's some blankets. It might get cold when you're sitting. There's some blankets right up here. And there's a bathroom right off the... There's a bathroom. The blue door is a bathroom for the guys. And inside the white door goes straight back, and there's a ladies' bathroom. Grab a seat. Don't be shy. And there's a blanket there if you want. Some might get kind of cold sitting there. It happens, for sure. All right. Have a seat. You can stand better. Oh, sitting all day. They do say that sitting is the new smoking. Have you guys heard that? Anyone heard that? Standing gas and the whole thing. Anyway, okay. All righty, we're almost there. Are we missing chairs? We're gonna do all right. Some people like to stand. Okay. So let's pretend for a minute that you are a framing contractor. You're building a residential home, and nice spring day. Your world is perfect. Floor is lit. Floor turned out level right here. Yeah, right in front. You want to go ahead? Open the seat. Floor turned out level. Walls going up square. Trusses fit. Everything in your world is hunky dory. But then one of your newbies comes up, and he's kind of got this ashen, stricken look on his face. Boss, I accidentally cut a truss. And your reaction might be something like, go white yourself, or it could be, I have more of a tendency, something like, Now, it's kind of funny. What does ikuna mean? It's Finnish language. I want you guys to say this. Ikuna. Can you repeat that?
Ikuna.
Okay, now let's say it with some. Ikuna. Very good. So what that means is window. Now, what were you thinking? There's a little story behind that. So I lived in Finland for a year, and my oldest son was with some friends, and he was about 5 when we lived there. So, and we spoke Finnish and Swedish to our kids, just a language hobby type of thing. And there were some boys in the basement. They were maybe about 12 to 14 years old. And there was another boy who understood Finnish as well. And so the kids got to talking about it. And then one of their friends says, hey, how do you say blankety blank or XYZ in Finnish? And my son's friend, without hesitating, said, ikkuna. And you know, Finnish kind of has these hard sounds, and it's really gratifying to release some steam like that, right? Ikkuna. And so these kids were running around, ikkuna, ha 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 ha, ikkuna. And so it got me thinking about cursing and swearing, and we kind of like, what's the purpose? Most of your vices in this world have an obvious pleasure point, but I don't understand why a collection of sounds, like these kids were deriving their pleasure from something that was quite harmless word, ikuna, window, right? So it's kind of been a fascinating thing for me since, and I don't understand it, but I do know that for me, it's generally associated with anger. It happens at the drop of a hat, human weakness. And I also know the good book tells us that you want to get your ducks in a row, and there's one way to do that. Otherwise, there's some serious consequences. So that's kind of a little bit about me and my belief system. But back to why trusses can be such a strong emotional, if something is wrecked, why you as a contractor on this nice spring day might have such a strong reaction. And the answer is in part fear, because most contractors, in 10 minutes, you guys are going to have more knowledge than a lot of the building industry out there, don't understand the simple function of a truss, how it works. So it's a little bit like if I use a cell phone. I don't understand how it works. It's called the black box theory, or a computer. I don't understand how that works, but I know how to use it. And early in my framing career, I was rolling trusses and going along, knew how to roll them, knew how to nail them. I knew that you don't cut them. I mean, that's hammered into people because there's serious problems. And now I'd like to show you how they work. I need 2 brave volunteers. Okay, we got 1, 2. Come on up. Come on behind the stand. Grab a seat. And your name is Conan?
Conan.
Cole, okay. Grab a seat there. Okay, Cole?
Yeah.
Do you like steep roofs or shallow roofs?
I like the way steep ones look, but I like for
Well, make a pick.
412.
Okay, so you got a steep roof. So I want you both to make a truss. Cross your hands like this. Put your elbows on the beam. Okay? And now you're steep, but we need to get you approximate a 412, like you said. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to step behind you here so I'm not getting in anyone's way. Okay, so now when we push on these guys' hands here, which of these roofs is better positioned to take a higher load? Steep, correct. Okay, so you're going to stand up. I need your help still. Conan, if you'll slide over to the center, you'll grab this side here. All right, so first now we need you to keep your low pitch. Okay, your name again? Cole and Conan. Okay, just brace Conan's elbow here. Brace it up nice and strong. Now when I push down, as long as the bottom doesn't give out, we've got a stable structure, right? Okay, this is true. It's not a truss yet, but it's a common building method. So if we look here, this is the common truss where you panic when somebody cuts it, and you'll understand why it's a problem in a bit. Now this here, if we look at this right here, so Cole had this portion of the bridge held up with his hand. I had the other, and then here's where the force was, held up. We all with me so far? Very simple. Okay. Here's another example, which is with timbers and trusses. This, you would look at it and think it's a truss and all this, but it's really not different than that bridge you've seen, or Conan's elbows right here. It's just working in 4 directions, okay? What you don't see in this picture, this was an early Timber Framers Guild project, and it was done somewhere in Oregon, an outdoor pavilion. I myself think it's a brilliant design. When I first seen it, I was like, yowzers, that's a big span and no post in the middle. As this here is, I don't know what the span is exactly, but this is like 30 feet, maybe even 40, and then it goes all the way across. So this compression, this abutment type of thing is working in 4 directions. You have your concrete pillars at the corner, and you can see these 4 pieces going like this, and they just have outward thrust. And what you're not seeing in this picture is I don't know for sure, but I know that this here is just engineered to resist thrust. All rebar concrete with a ton of ballast down here, probably more than 20 yards of concrete. And so as long as there's enough weight and enough mass and those corners cannot blow out, you achieve stability. And there's one other piece looking at this. You have a scissor truss here. It goes like so, but now knowing that this is nothing but a betting man would say that This probably just has a little bit more concrete and rebar to take a little more thrust going out that way. And it's a relatively minor load compared to the big one. Make sense? Okay. Now let's talk about an actual truss, and we'll need our volunteers again. This is a simple truss, a small truss, and here's what we're going to demonstrate right here. So, Cole, if you'll grab this string right here, this is going to be a bottom cord. Get your 412 truss. Oh, we got to get your first, put your string on that. We're going to put a bottom cord here. Go ahead. Get one on the other end. Let's get them locked nice around the elbows. Okay, now make your truss. Okay, and then bang. As long as the string doesn't break or a newbie doesn't cut it, we're good, right? That is what a simple truss works like, and that's exactly what you're seeing in this picture. Okay, now let's suppose that, no, keep it there.
It wasn't locked.
Oh, it wasn't locked. Oh, yeah, we got a problem.
No, it's failed.
Right. So let's just say that this is, instead of being 18 inches long, that this is 25 feet long. Go ahead, Cole, push down in the middle. And if you get a load in the middle here, it's likely to cave, right? Cave and bust. What do? So we've got a solution for that right here. This string is a king post right in the center of the truss. So wrap it around the top because the peak is solid. Pinch that off. Peak is solid. It's not going anywhere, so we can hang from the peak. We have this here. Cole, if you'll grab this little gizzy, technically known as a gizzy, it's actually a web, but and it looks like our mouth is a little, there we go. There we go. So then now we have a support, right? Now so there's force here, this piece is in compression, it can't be a string. It goes down here, it adds more tension to the king post, which adds more pressure going out to the elbow. And as long as newbie doesn't cut the bottom cord, it's still good. With me so far? Okay, now we're going to complicate matters just a little bit more. So we're going to create a scissor truss. So we're going to just go bring your elbows in a bit. Okay. All right, that's a scissor truss. Okay. Now the thing that changes here is when just by pushing on the peak, we have a lot of pressure going down as well. If this were a bow, like a bow and arrow, you can see that with pressure down, these are going out. It's trying to pop that bottom tight. So that means that the joint right here in the center is going to be your most important joint with a scissor truss. And then as long as the elbows hold, you're good. And then if it spans even longer, you can add compression, post, and then another tension and a compression. And that's basically how a truss works. Any questions?
What kind of trusses are those there?
This one is a simple truss right here. I've got a couple examples. And this is wood instead of a string, but that's basically the elbows being right here with the top cord extended down a little bit. That's called the elevated or raised bottom cord. And here you have a king truss. And these webs, a lot of times with the sizes we're using, I got a problem here. A lot of times with the timber sizes we're using, these webs are cosmetic. You bet. Don't tangle my string. Okay. So we're going to get into this. We're going to take some projects that we've done, and as we go through them, we'll talk about how a truss can influence home style, different applications, and then we'll talk about spans and different characteristics as well. All right? So you just seen a picture of this, simple truss. Question, why do you not see a simple truss with a big span? Generally, you're going to be limited by the size of your top cord because, like we demonstrated here with Conan's forearms, you have to resist bending here. So if you're going to go, say, 30 foot here, you're going to have a pretty massive top cord. And a lot of times the timbers in that case get so big, they're not really pretty. And people like good looks of timber framing. So you're balancing looks and function, right? And also, so it can be kind of too big with this piece, but then this whole big hole here where you get a big span, it can look incomplete or naked. And it just doesn't look right. So that is my theory on why we have not done to date a big simple span or a simple truss like this. All of our simple trusses are generally small. Most of the time they'll have an arch because it kind of fills that space. And then you might ask, well, why wouldn't you put a king truss or a king post on a small truss? And it just gets too busy. Such a thing as too busy and it doesn't look right. You're balancing that beauty, right? So that is one example of a simple truss. Here's another that's a little bigger. This is in a master bedroom. And this had such a steep arch, we built it in two pieces. And you can see that line there, kind of two big splices with all the pegs. It makes for a real cool joint. Not so practical, but that's what we did. And where that truss came from, it was playing with the theme that was already started in the front of this home here. It just that it was smaller, and to start adding webs and whatnot, it was kind of make it busy. And then another concept that we'll do with hybrid timber framing as well is the guts of the home where your main living area will a lot of times have higher frequency of timbers and be more rustic. But then as you go down the hallways or into other rooms, you don't want to have that same level of timber frequency or rustic factor. So by going to this, you still had timbers in the master bedroom, but it was starting to bleed out a little bit. It wasn't ramped up on the rustic factor and kind of give a smooth transition. So there's a nice flow. Any questions on that? Okay, we're going to talk about scissor trusses. We already understand how they function, correct? Good. Here's a scissor truss that's a little bit unorthodox. I haven't done one just like this yet. It's a 50-foot span, and you can see there's metal plates. There was an option to use hidden metal in the trusses to hide the plates, but the owner liked them, and it makes it a little bit easier to do as well. Here's a picture from another direction. Oh, and if you have a helicopter hanging out in front of your house, we've got a solution for you. So here and then is kind of a cutaway from the model. It's tough to get in a picture. It's kind of the ultimate man cave tree fort type of thing, right? And here, the scissor is, yeah, everything's working. I mean, this is your most important joint. Then you got here and here. And as long as those don't give away, you're golden. I do have to tell you a little story about this job. There's a road that came down the hillside. It's a fairly steep hillside. And the guy he wanted a miner's cabin in the woods. And this road went winding down. I don't know what degree it was, but you know, it was steep. And in fact, we were bringing one load of timbers down, and the guy was. So here's how it went down. My backing, these trusses were broken half. We shipped them broken half, and backing them down this little windy thing with this narrow road and down this steep hill. I had a guy helping me who was kind of a cowboy himself, a risk taker, and he went back the trailer down. We brought him down one piece at a time with a forklift because he says, if you get stuck on that hill, I mean, one wrong move backing up and there you are. Well, it went down. His brakes on the forklift weren't so hot. I mean, the things you do sometimes, you look back at them and you just kind of get in these situations. Anyway, but he made her down for the first 2 trusses. The owner himself says, hey, I back up bolts all the time. I'll do it. Fly at it, but with your truck, said my guy. And so he did back the first one down, smooth as silk. Second one, it was good that it had dried up that day because he was burning rubber when he got stuck trying to get 4-wheel drive, trying to get back up the hill to get straightened out and back down. And then this is pretty high, and that's a huge load with a forklift. And this guy who's helping me, his name was Les, and very talented guy. Like I said, a risk taker, but even he was puckered up on this. This forklift is extended way out, probably similar to what we have here, and with a heavy load. And he was looking at the ground. Any little bump in the ground, he would just go over and just extra slow because you're just up like this. Anyway, got it up, but forever, iced into my memory, branded. So that's scissor truss. And there's one other aspect. This slide is not here so much for a scissor truss. This could be an arched, it could be straight, it could be whatever. The point I want to give you here is this space was open before, roughly 35 feet across, and they wanted a covered area. So where do you put a covered area? Well, cries for the center. There's a front door there. I mean, there's a door right in the center, right? But if you just put the main structure in, it's going to be a little bit cramped. So one of the design tricks that we always keep in our hip pocket is unifying something when it looks cramped. It's a little bit like if you're getting together for a group photo and maybe you don't know everyone so well and your personal space is starting to get a little bit twitchy. Well, if you just go ahead and embrace it and just put your arm on the person's shoulder, well, now it's kind of like, okay, now it looks natural and comfortable. Same thing with this. These porch roofs, unify it. Now it no longer looks like it's cramped in there. Now it's unified, it looks comfortable, and they get a bigger space for they had kids, so toys and barbecues and just an extension of the main living area. A great solution. There is one drawback to this solution. Can anybody tell me what it might be? It has to do with dark winter days.
Wind and rain.
What's that?
Covering the windows.
Covering the windows, yeah. That's going to be dark in the house. I think the remedy was to put multiple skylights, maybe a few up by the door, and get some light down. It's still not going to be as light as before that was added, but it helps. Now you have skylights. Now you got to get up and clean them. No, it keeps on rolling.
Fix the leak.
Yeah, fix the leaks. They do a better job flashing these days. Okay, so that was the scissor truss. Queen truss. This is a project we did 7 years ago maybe. Here's what we started with. Front PDF elevation. Here's the back. And you'll notice there's curves here. That's a lot of times designers will put in something. They don't know exactly what the owner wants, but they don't really have the expertise or the time or the patience to deal with any timber design, especially after they have moved closet walls the umpteenth time and the kitchen island moved over and all the design details that go into a floor plan. Pretty tired, but this is still a great start, a great canvas for us. Here's what we came up with for getting timber influence affecting the home style. And this queen truss is really ideal for a craftsman style home. That's just really where they look. And if you look at the craftsman style porches, a lot of times you'll see those stacked beams up like that. And they really don't even truss should be eliminated as far as the timber piece of it, because it doesn't really work like that. If you were gonna make this a truss, you'd have to add some angles and you have to calculate tension loads, which an engineer doesn't wanna do if you can do it with a beam, which we don't wanna do if, that's a lot of joinery and hidden, dealing with that if you can do it with a beam. But the point here was that this really fit for the style. And as far as craftsmen, you see that they got painted white posts with the beams. You could do shake, you could do stone on the columns. And there's really a lot you can do style-wise to really get that right look that's what you're after. And I'm gonna dig a little deeper on this whole piece. So here's the front, a close-up of the front entry. And you can see there's a coffered ceiling with space above the beam. And that turned out to be, this idea was born from the inside. What's gonna kind of look nice on the inside and be a little bit airy. So here you can see that coffered ceiling makes it a little bit airy, the airflow above it, and it makes the beam stand out. You still have the craftsman detail cut. And that coffered ceiling brings it from the front door all the way through to the back patio, which has kind of the same element, that coffered ceiling and that. So when we can do that for people, you kind of figure out what they're trying to go for, look and feel-wise, their style, and then find something that flows through and just feels really wholesome and hits the money target. Feels so good, really fun. So that is a queen truss. You'll see examples like that, but generally it's not a truss. They do make them with gang plates in different ways that an attic truss. You guys ever seen an attic truss over a garage? Will probably has, yeah. That's a version of a queen truss. Okay, here we're at a king truss. We already know how it works. In this case, I'm going to ask, what do you suppose the knee braces are there for?
Shear.
Shorten the span. If this wasn't a truss, that's what it would be doing. Shear. What do you mean by shear, Conan?
Side to side movement.
Yep. Racking strength. And so we've got it in 4 places here. And you also can pick up racking strength through the roof diaphragm. It's connected back to the house, and you nail the plywood well. And in order to shift, it's got to pull away from the house. So you can pick up strength that way as well. And sometimes on short entries, engineers will take the path of least resistance. Yeah, put your knee braces in. I don't really care about that. I'm going to use the roof to justify the shear. Here is a 48-foot span. This is an arch truss shown here. Now here's a little sad story. This particular client had deep pockets, but left all the communication to the builder. And that happens a lot with real wealthy people just because they're so crunched on time. And the builder told us about his project. We designed this up, but the builder never really, just a busy guy and maybe a little disorganized, never really got together with his owner in time to where the engineer had designed something up that works and all the plates and all this. And it's great. I mean, it's still fun to do. I mean, this is a 48-foot solid piece bottom cord. And, but the reason it landed here instead of what is artistically balanced and piece of art, simply because ducks weren't lined up, ball was dropped. So if you're working on your project, whether you're doing the whole thing yourself, you're involving us or a builder or whatever it is, be proactive with getting the timbers figured out. They have a big influence and you can do a lot. Yes?
How do you achieve the arch on that long span?
It's busted into 2 pieces. The question was, how do you achieve the arch on that long span? And it's busted into 2 pieces, and there's a hidden fastener, multiple hidden fasteners right here, because this is the joint that's going to blow apart first with a scissor, right? There's that, and then you got scissor. You got your 2 joints here, and then you have you have to really connect well to the king post because of that twang factor.
So that's just a large beam that has been cut into that shape.
Yeah, it's busted into two
So you got a
pieces.
pretty big-
So you still have a sizable beam. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you're talking
Yeah.
30 plus inches there. Okay, so yeah, just be proactive with it and get ahead of the curve on that. Okay, hammer beam truss. Who here is familiar with a hammer beam truss? Okay, nobody. In the timber framing world, this is kind of the crown jewel, for the whole, like that many timber framers have this as their logo because it's such an iconic piece of what timber framing is. There's a fly in the ointment. Okay? And that fly has to do with this joint right here. With a hammer beam truss, the load comes down, it trails down, and it comes down to there, which pushes out on the post, which makes that post try to go out. And so this member right here, that joint is in tension. And so the whole roof is stacked on those two triangles down at the bottom. That's what's holding it up. And in one timber framing publication years ago, someone was giving advice with a hammer beam truss, and their advice was that bring those bottom knee braces down as low as you dare and then go a little bit further. Because the lower you go, the better your leverage is for thrust right here. Makes sense? It's trying to push the post out. If that joint falls apart, boom, it's gone. Whereas if you had a real steep knee brace here, now you're giving advantage to leverage. And it's really, really weak. But there's another way to solve this. Anyone care to hazard a guess? Conan?
I'm looking at this and going, man, that is just, I can't even imagine trying to build something like this. The ways that it could go wrong is just incredible. So I'm automatically going to say, why don't we have one just like that?
Just one straight down?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I don't think that would change the picture a whole lot. That is a crut truss. So if you had a piece like Conan's saying, all the way down,
just from the second one.
okay, this is a crut truss, and that's really stable. That's just
Yeah, that would be the.
really a crock is nothing more than a glorified teepee, popping them together, right? So let's see here with my. Okay, you want this. I'm going to erase this here so I can give you guys a clear picture. There's actually two ways to solve this. And I'm going to show you the first way that we did. Because of that thrust picture and the inherent weakness with the hammer beam truss, what you don't see here is there's big concrete footings here. Who wants to fill in the answer? How do we solve it? Rebar and concrete, nothing but compression load. Same as that buttress, same as the arched bridge, same as that other one. The engineer was looking at it, he said, hey, your concrete columns are big enough, we just make the footing bigger to where we have enough mass. That makes my job easy. He's not having to calculate tension loads and some herky connection here and so on and so forth. With me so far? Now, the other way to see it, to solve it, that you'll see in a lot of pictures, is simply to take some decorative wrought iron metalwork, bring that across, lock them in, right? And we had one job that was down in California. The job never came to be, things changed, but it was really steep roof, but it was about a 50-foot span. And we couldn't get our engineer to sign off on it. He kept saying, hey, do that. Get a tie rod in there to hold it together, because it's just inherently, I can't get the numbers to work. It does work, but at today's engineering standards have a ×5 safety factor. So it's tougher to get an engineer to go stamp of approval. Okay? That's the hammer beam. And as we're talking about this, the hammer beam was used in churches a lot back in the day. And what they did was just like what we did with the concrete and rebar, except for they were using stone and rubble infill for big mass. You see these this right here on the outsides of those old churches, that looks a lot like decorative, like ornate concrete pillar to me. And then your hammer beam truss puts thrust out that way. And then one more example of a small hammer beam truss we did. This is pretty small, so I didn't even get an engineer involved. These triangles here hold this up, just a simple, but you can see there's not much load here. There's a simple truss right here with an arch. There's a valley in the front and a hip on the back. And there's no ridge. It's basically 6-7 foot here at the longest point, with just decking on top. So there's not a ton of load there, but this was designed as two pieces. So you drove up from the front of the house here, you see a welcoming entry, and you pull around to parking, and you're still seeing an inviting, like, here's the front door, welcome. That's where the design came from, and the hammer beam truss was just part of the back and forth between us and the owners. Okay, now we're going to go into an arch truss. Here's another project, drawn up a little bit more of a traditional or craftsman style. The changes, when we look, you're going to see the next picture is the after. These areas right here, and then just basically the post. Then we're going to have some arches. The owner was somewhat like the arch style there. And so the arches do their thing. They soften the architecture. They create a certain look and feel. A few key points here, key points, is even these little corbels, when they're spread out, it depends. You don't want to overdo things, but getting things spread out to where there's kind of a nice feel the whole way through is something that we look for. This one point, this right here is, if you're going to do anything, if you're going to leave out anything, scratch out these, but leave that. Why is that? It's because in combination with this, it creates an unmistakable hierarchy, visual hierarchy. And that's what part of what beauty is. If this was some, massive timber influence as well, and you confuse the eyes, it's not as pretty. You have to create that visual hierarchy. And so that was kind of the big thing here. And then the posts are noticeably fatter. And another big influence is the higher stone. That's another control knob for visual beauty. You can raise or lower this. And what we found out is that by doing that, a golden rectangle is 5 parts to 8 parts. And you kind of get that in essence you can kind of use that stone to capture that, and it breaks your eyes up. And now you're seeing beauty. It doesn't look too high or too spindly, or it doesn't look too short and squat and heavy. It's really kind of fascinating, and we have a lot of fun with it. Here's the back of the same home. See that here's a post. A post is by far the most economical way to hold up a roof, load, whatever. Posts happen to be a pain for most people. So here was what we did for the back. And it says arch truss. In reality, as I look at this, you have one tension load basically here, and that load kind of comes up a little bit, but it's just going through the fibers of the beam. I wonder how much actual down, bow and arrow type thrust is coming there. But as far as design-wise, a couple of things. This sub-bottom cord is really helpful for adjusting where that arch hits. And you can also get your the visual massing, nice there. And then this knee brace here, it does two things. It is functional, it gives the shear like Conan was talking about, so nothing's falling over. That's a lot of roof to come off that wall and use the roof diaphragm. And then it also gives visual stability. Whenever you have angles like that, instead of straight, it really does something here or here. I don't know where it is, but it really makes a difference.
Can we go back a couple slides?
Sure. And then one other thing that's also cut down the span. Instead of having to span from here, our actual truss starts right here and here. Yeah.
I was curious, the one with the multiple gable, one back.
Yep.
One back.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
takes,
that, the upper ones, them truss designs, are them actually structural or are they just hung under the gable as decorative?
the corbels help hold it up, but they're just hung right behind the back of the fascia. On that previous one, the early one with the simple trusses, where you see the front of the home, those were 2-3 foot out from the wall with a bigger overhang, and so those were carrying a small load and they were set before the roof. But as far as dollars go, you know, resale value and blah blah blah, if you're looking to maximize your return on investment, they're really powerful. That
Yeah,
cover it? Yep.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you.
This is a little bit slow here. Okay, here we are. So here's a arch truss like we talked about. And yeah, it's got the hidden connectors here. You got there's some all thread and different things holding that together. And these are both pocketed in. They need to pocket in so they don't go down. And then we've got some special joinery up here at the peak also to connect that, because this is a string, right? In essence, it's a string. And then you got your things here, and that's quintessential arch truss. And funny thing with arch trusses, a lot of times we'll almost always draw them with webs in. But part of the artistry and what looks the best, generally what happens with almost every one of our designs is we cross that Goldilocks threshold, put too much in, no, back it off. And that's kind of nice thing with the 3D model is, you're not committed like a teenager with their truck. All decked out, and they just went too far, didn't know when to stop. Right? Okay, this was basically Conan right here. This was you, Conan, with your scissor truss, right?
Yeah.
That was you. We haven't done one to date exactly like this. We do have at the end, it's similar. I'll show you a truss that is basically a 4-way cable truss. And then here's a project that never came to be. It was originally a timber frame. They had a complete timber frame setup in the middle of this home. The owners loved the location. They wanted to open it up somehow. And so we were involved in getting rid of a bunch of timbers, designing what was going to work. And this is kind of a modern rustic look. This truss right here, it is a truss. It's inverted. Now, if we were going to make this a steep truss, we're going to make this steep truss to make our thrust load, the loads still, these are going to be some herky connectors, but if we were going to make it steep, we might do something like this. But there's a couple problems with that. Number one, it's kind of unsightly. And number two is, the further you get down here, there's tension on this. So if you can imagine taking a big fat exercise band, pushing it up, and then holding it, it's going to start wobbling after a bit, right? And that's what you would deal with a long extension, where this one's nice and choked up. And so you don't have to try to brace that somehow. But there is still, you do still need, if the cable were to be totally flat, it would be like trying to lift yourself up by your bootstraps. There's nothing, no triangles to work with. But because now you get a little triangle here, you tighten that up with a lot of tension. In fact, this joint, what I had planned on was a metal, like 3/4 plate on the end of that, and it is what it takes. It's hard to believe. With the beam butting that, getting enough square inches to take all that thrust with a heavy welded joint connected to the cable, to take all that thrust. And maybe that plate would even have to come up higher because there's just a lot of thrust going on with that. A cool concept. Any questions on that? Mono truss. The times I've seen this work the best for beauty and artistry and looking and feeling right is when it's a hip. It's leading up to something. It projects energy up and out. Over here, you got the windows and a view. And over here as well, you've got the natural scene going up and out. And you'll see mono trusses done with 2x4s and 2x6s, where sometimes they're flat and they just look like so. And it's pretty much just a compression post is the way it works. They can span quite a ways. These two examples are 25, 30 feet. Most of the time, like this web here, most of the time with what we're doing, you're gonna see that beam size to make the span. Maybe this post collects some of the load. But if you get that angle too low, you're fighting the blowout thrust. I have done one timber mono truss years ago. This was before we were 3D modeling, so I think that would have solved it. You had the bottom ceiling, you had an upper wall, came down to walls like this, and we had a timber truss that fit in here like whatever it did. And it looked okay, but one of the things that you run into is this is kind of just a dead energy zone. It's just kind of like an armpit. It just doesn't really go anywhere. And what you'll see people do many times is they'll make a cathedral ceiling because then it's not quite this dead end dark cave up there. So we haven't done a lot of mono trusses. Some. Okay, box truss. You guys know what a box truss is? Anyone seen one?
Is that like what's used on arenas?
Arenas?
Yeah, they have a huge span, and all the trusses are built of 2x6s in a box.
Oh, kind of like two pieces. Yeah, that's a pole barn truss. That's generally just your standard truss, King's truss version like we went through here with multiple webs. Box truss looks like this. So this particular home had the front door right here. You can't see it right there. And that's what we came up with. You will notice just from the first initial take, this roof here, that shed roof wasn't in there before with a little bit of timber. Bang. Got that visual hierarchy. Beauty achieved, right? And here's the box truss. It basically looks like a box with webs in it, okay? Except for this isn't technically a box truss. It's probably starting to be aware of this now. This beam, all of our timbers generally, not all of them, are sized by eye. What looks right. It's not what the engineer wants, but what looks right. And we use a 3D modeling to do that because intuition has got a lot of holes in it. And so this beam, what looks right, makes a span, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So the engineer just does that and says, do what you want with the other parts. But there is a purpose to this box truss. Earlier we talked about a knee brace giving shear strength. When you have a box truss working like this, you connect these two working halves. So in wrestling terms, it'd be like putting someone in a full Nelson rather than a half Nelson. Because when it forces here, you got this triangle over here really working to keep it up in tandem with this. So it works from a shear perspective as well. And then we have some box trusses on the inside. Here's one picture. It's kind of up high. This is a loft. I'm going to show you the next picture. And here's taken more of it at an acute angle. You see the stairs coming up. There's a loft. You got some beams over the kitchen. You can see the windows. They had a really well lit foyer, front door there, other box truss. And this box truss, again, isn't technically a box truss. This is a big beam, but a good portion of that beam, we chose to push it up into the roof. Why? Because it looked too herky and it just didn't look right. And it would push everything down here to where we had a headroom problem as well. And if this would have been all the way down and we tried to maintain that truss with this at this height, you got just little tiny space to work with. And who wants that? You drop money for that, Conan?
No,
No, I wouldn't either.
if it don't work, it don't work.
Yep. Okay. Tension ring truss. So this is a floating gazebo. Have any of you guys driven by Bethany Vineyards in Ridgewood? Maybe been there? Okay, you probably didn't realize it then, but this is a tension ring truss. And so what that means is if you can lock your arms in a circle and put a bunch of rafters that lock up at the peak, as long as my fingers do not give way or my elbow doesn't come apart, nothing can fall down. Just the same as the buttress piece or even just a simple truss. But it's just that the tension is done in a ring. So looking from the top, this is a hexagon. As long as we figured out strong enough connections at each one of those corners, we can load it up and it all thrusts out and it just locks it in tight, tension ring. So it's another form of a truss, just different application. Make sense? Okay, and these knee braces add a nice look and they got a little curve. You guys probably are aware of why they're there.
Sure.
Yep, keep things from falling over. Everything has to, gotta get a triangle.
Triangles, that's it.
Gotta create a triangle to get rigidity. In fact, here's a little piece. How many of you people have seen an old barn that is just maybe 6 inches out of plumb? Dollars to donuts, when that thing was built, they got the wall, they have a lap, or a lot of times it's a ship lap, all the way up. They have nails at each stud all the way through. And for a while, those nails are rigid enough to give that wall stability. And for the builders then, hey, this is rock solid. We don't need to do anything. But in time, each nail, if it's develops through wind and movement, whatever, if it gets even a 16th of movement, and you go 16th times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now you can get your wall leaning, right? And so the fix for that is to get, and you'll see different types of wall bracing, creating a triangle. And then today what's happening with plywood, your plywood basically is, it's got enough nails on the edges, and that's whenever you're looking at a shear wall, that's what the engineer is calculating. How many nails can you fit on the edge without breaking the wood, because there's more metal than wood, right? So how far away from the plywood? And when you get plywood, it's basically creating a triangle through the sheet. And you just have enough nails in the center to keep the plywood from warping off the stud. And that's kind of a, yeah, that's how it works. Okay, here is that cable truss, a 4-way cable truss. This project started out as a tension ring, a warming hut, a snowmobile cabin, a hunting cabin, is up by St. Helens. And you just have your hips going down, low walls. But then when you start looking at usability, getting these little pop-outs on each corner gives you more light, a little more headroom, kind of these places to congregate, much more usable, but a tension ring no longer works. I don't know if you can see it clear enough, but can you see what's holding that up? Yep. And it's just a 4-way. It wouldn't work Well, I guess it would work two-way, but you connect through the middle, and then we did design the wall height and everything for here. This is at 7 foot high, which is about right for you to come in with all your hunting gear and snowmobile equipment. Throw them over the thing, and you got it drying for the hot fire. And this is one of the few projects where the engineer mandated a bigger size than what my eye wanted. And so we had to really get creative because, small space, and you get, this was St. Helens, so I don't know, was the snow load 50 pounds, 80 pounds, I don't know what it was, but it was big. And the thing that really killed it here was when the beams go up to the peak, and anything up high, we'll do this with regular trusses too, you have to watch and you don't get too much timber mass up high. It just feels like it's gonna fall on your head somehow. And so you'll notice these rafters are tapered. Up here, the load isn't so important, but down here, the bending moment, where it comes in and that wants to bend right there, that's where you needed the beef. And so that was one of the tricks we used there to make it all look good visually. Anyone ever seen one of these? What doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. It just goes around and around, one piece bearing on the next. And this is actually called a circular roof. You'll be hard pressed to find an engineer to stamp it. They do work. And I was first introduced to this at a Timber Framers conference. This was back in 2008, 2012. And they had a slideshow. Different people would come up and show some projects they did that were noteworthy. And one guy pulled one of his projects up like this, and he says, well, here's a fun, exciting way to lose money. And that is, I've always got a kick out of that because so many times my heart can get ahead of my head and I'll do fun stuff that look cool and hurt the pocketbook. We got to stay in business. So, but it is a kind of an inherent weakness in the timber frame industry to want to do this cool, fun stuff. But when it costs too much, well, take a little cut, and then it takes longer than you think, and there you go. But anyway, fun bit of trivia.
Better than drugs.
Better than drugs, yes. Okay, so we're gonna start our landing. Buckle your seatbelts. Put your trays up. So we've talked about how trusses work and how timber trusses can influence or affect home style, right? We all there? Now I want to tighten your takeaway a little bit tighter. These 15 pictures are in our book, which we're going to raffle off 2 of them. And if you happen to want one and you don't win the raffle, you don't have to cry, because instead of $47, it's $20 and you walk out with one. That's chapter 15, managing your money. What you see here is the same space. So you've got the same wall length, same width. The wall height does not change, nor does the roof pitch change. And yet you're going to have a completely different feel with all of these examples, just with the virtue of different timber application. What is the takeaway? Flexibility. You can do so much with the timbers, and then if we get involved early enough and things aren't quite working, well, maybe we adjust the wall height a little bit higher, or we change the configuration of the room, either for looks, or maybe we can save a little bit of money, or whatever it is, when it's just on paper. So you look at all the different timber configurations, and then you combine different room sizes, you get just flexibility. That's the word I want you to leave with. Flexibility with hybrid timber framing. You can really do a lot. And sometimes people come to us and their budget just really isn't workable. Most of the time, with the flexibility you see, we can work with most budgets. And a lot of times I don't fault people for doing this. I would do the same thing, but they come in, a lot of times someone will come in and they may have where the architect has drawn in a bunch of trusses down a grade hall, 6 foot OC, 6 foot on center, and they say, hey, how much for a truss? And with our knowledge of flexibility and what people start off saying they want and where they eventually move to, with our knowledge of that, we're a little bit like, whoa, Nelly, like if I walked into a doctor's office or and said, how much for a surgery? You're like, oh, whoa, we don't have to cut your leg off just yet. Let's think about this. And we're doing the same thing. We don't need to spend all that money on X amount of trusses. We can get a better look. Let's just see where we land with this. Let's get a little information. And so that's part of the brainstorm that kicks off anytime we're going to do business with someone. It starts with a 30 to 90 minute brainstorm. And the purpose of that is to understand what you're trying to achieve. And then for you to understand, or anyone who comes in, are we the best horse to ride? Are we going to match how you like to roll? Can we get you the look you want, at the investment you want? And so that's kind of what you're looking for, that good fit. And for the record, when somebody walks in the door, generally, they hold their cards close. They're a little apprehensive. They don't want to get taken for a ride. And we are apprehensive as well, because a poor fit is just pain all the way around. If it's a poor fit, you don't have to kick me out of the saddle. I'll jump. It's not worth it. Life's too short. And so there's that. So flexibility is that piece. And the last takeaway, if you don't remember flexibility, if you don't remember how a truss works, if you don't remember how trusses can affect home style, remember this: with your home design, with decisions in general, bigger decisions in general, don't stop at your first idea, first solution. Try lots of ideas. That's one thing that we've discovered working with project after project after project, is it's 1 part inspiration, 3 parts perspiration. Just a lot of ideas. And that's really kind of our secret sauce. So if you don't have anything else, don't stop at your first idea, whether you're buying a car, shoes, getting married, buying a dog, all of it. Okay. Here's what it looks like in practice. 1 part inspiration, 3 parts perspiration. We're not going to show you the whole thing, and we've come to think of it as timber art, because so many times we're not just building posts and just this whole conglomeration of wood. We're looking at kind of the style, and a lot of times we're pulling pieces out to find that balance. And so that means that we have to charge more per board foot, but it gives a better impact and a better feel. So here's kind of a starting point. The builder came to us with a problem. His home was too small for the price he needed to sell it at. He's like, he didn't want to come to us because, whenever you guys get involved, I got to break out a bigger check. But yet he was there knocking on our door. And he says, I got to have something that sets us apart, because it's too small. The square footage doesn't match. It's just, I'm not going to be able to sell it. I need to move it faster. Can you help me out? Well, so we started, and this is a kind of a tried and true traditional look. Your ridge beam, your rafters, something in the kitchen, kind of gets a nice wood color. And it gives a nice traditional look, and nothing wrong with it. There is a fair amount of board footage, and even though this is totally cosmetic, the house is framed up, it takes a lot of work to get it up and installed and all that. Okay, so that was one option. We tried a lot of different things, but in talking to him and figuring out where he was, this is where we wound up.
Wow.
And so a lot had been taken away. What you're seeing here is you're seeing a kind of for the affectionado, the through tenon. The king post has a nice little flare up at the top. And it's brought down to this simplest elegance. And then you still have a false beam here that kind of gives a border between the kitchen and the great room. And then the play over here is done with a light. It's just slightly curved. The iron is also perpendicular to the radii. And then the piece on the top isn't just slung up there ham-handed either. It's figured out for size and length and then softened on the corners. And so the whole thing works together, and he was able to accomplish what he wanted there. This, even though there are less timbers, all of that playing around with ideas and finding that look is saved the day for him, and he was willing to pay at the end. And one point with this, what percentage of our work is purely cosmetic? What percentage is structural, if you had to take a guess?
Probably a bigger percentage of it's
Cosmetic?
cosmetic.
Yeah, there's a derogatory term in the timber framing world for that. They call it trimber framing, like trim timber. I would say that over 70% of what we do is structural. It's still timber art, generally structural. And going cosmetic at max, Josh, would you say it saves about 30% over structural? I mean, it depends.
It doesn't really, because all of the timbers that we put in, we want them to look like they're holding up the wall. We want those timbers to look like they're structural, even if they're not, even if they're totally different.
So so Josh has said, want them to look like they're natural, like they fit. And so therefore you don't save a lot. You can save some engineering costs and maybe some connections. You don't save a lot by going cosmetic. So 70% of what we do, or greater, maybe 80, is bona fide structural stuff. Okay?
That was real nice though. That really works.
Yeah.
It was not a whole lot of board feet.
Mhm.
I think, so was he pretty pleased? Was he able to get off of it then?
Yeah.
I bet. That's a nice work.
Okay, thank you. Been a great audience. Give yourself a round of applause. And let's see, we got question and answer next. We are at 7:45, so 7:45. How are we doing? Do we need bathroom refreshments? Do you want a little break and come back to the Q&A? Or do we want to just roll right along and then when we're done, we're done? Keep going. We're all good? All right. So question and answers. Josh is going to come up here and help me for that part as well. While he's coming up here, I promised the online audience I would show them how to create a truss without hidden tension connectors. The simplest way, an age-old timber truss that they came up with years ago, and that is, how do I add, do I just go up? How do I add another one? Here we go. Nope. All right, Taylor, help.
Just draw it under that.
Oh, it's in presentation mode? Okay. Okay.
Strong like horse.
Strong.
Smart like tractor.
Strong like horse, smart like tractor. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to illustrate with a simple truss. That's your bottom cord. And with this, you could theoretically cut this down and start your top cord here. But the joint that I'm talking about for collecting that tension load goes like this. Oops. Wow, it's getting smarter than me. There we go. So you see how that foot comes down and you just carve that into the wood. And now that is connecting that load. You're not relying on pins or pegs you pull apart. In order for this truss to fail, it's got to rip out all of that wood. Now the problem, most of the times you'll see it start off closer to the top. And the reason for that is this is where the weight comes down. And if you taper this at first, you have less wood where it's in the wall, and the point is further away from the wall, increasing that chance of bending on the bottom cord, even though it's totally tension. But that's an age-old way to build a timber truss without any complicated tension fasteners. Okay, so first off, does anyone have any questions? We have some that have been compiled earlier, but any questions? Anything's fair game? You look like you're thinking, what do you got?
Wish I would have talked to you before I built these trusses.
You
You got a
said,
question, sir?
Yeah, if you got a bunch of pieces of wood that you're tying together, like, you know, say 3 or 4 2x6s or 3x4s, is there a good way to connect those together?
so the question is, if we're tying together 2x6s or 2x4s, 2 or 3 of them, is there a good way to tie them together? Are they going to be oriented?
Just either trying to get a span out of it or something, or just
Oh.
or tension load or whatever.
Well, one application that I've seen, and it's in these new commercial buildings, they do a post and beam style building with glue lamps. They're like 10 foot apart, and they've actually built the floor with just a whole bunch of 2x4s standing on edge, one nailed to the other, bang, 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 and they create a floor that looks pretty cool. And that's spanning about 10 feet with just 2x4s, one after the other. Simply nail them together, and it makes that span really solid. As far as trying to nail pieces together, I have a story about that. So one time I was working late on a job. We had a truss truck there, and he was stopped by to lift up some beams for us, and he got stuck. And so the idea, he got his boom over there all shortened up. And the idea was to push down on the boom, and it lifts his truck up, and we could put some dunnage under his wheels and get him on his way. And there was nothing really handy. So I grabbed 3 2x6s, okay, planked them together and put it under his boom. And he went down. And so, divide and conquer, right? Julius Caesar. Well, that's what happened with these pieces of wood. As soon as the nails started going heavy, and it's going to bow, well, as soon as one of those 2x6s went, bang! I mean, they just leap off the thing. Then the whole thing went down. And no one was hurt. I mean, we happened to be standing in the right place. So then I got a solid piece of wood, so 6x8 or something, and that holds because there's no nails. Had I used screws and plenty of them, those 3 2x6s would have probably worked fine. So to answer your question, Rodney, I would we have a sawmill. I mean, you've seen that.
We just cut a longer piece of wood. But what you could do is stagger your joints and glue it and nail it.
Screw it and glue it.
Yeah,
That's right.
screw it and glue it. I mean,
Speak
but
up.
stagger your joints. That's really important.
Just tapering the thing, that's all, or just.
And so,
There's
okay.
there's a way, I had a friend who did some work over in Africa, and there's a way to cut a 2x6. I think you can find it online, where you can lock the two together. I'm not exactly sure how to
Like
lock
a finger joint.
sort of, but it's kind of got a funky shape. He said, you've never seen it here as a builder here, but he said they do it all the time there. It's just like a common thing. But,
So for those who maybe couldn't hear, Cole was saying he has a friend that worked in Africa and did some work there, and they're using a joint to join timbers together. There is such a joint in the timber frame world. It's called a scarf joint. It looks something like this.
that looks about like what he explained.
And
Similar.
It can work good for tension. You can put a keyway in. You can connect it in different ways. We did an old barn repairing some posts, with a similar joint. As far as taking a span, that's dubious. But there is value in that. And 13:1 is the ratio. If it's 1 inch tall, it should be 13 inches long for a really strong scarf joint. Could we have a couple questions? We're in the back first.
I'm just gonna say in the industry, like what they do now with the new mechanical, they just do a manufactured finger joint and then out in the field they'll press it together. So I don't know what you're looking at exactly on your situation, but glue lamps are always the best. I mean, you get so much more shear with glue because it's full lamination rather than nails or screws. So I don't know what your options are.
We just had someone comment that glue lambs are using glue and finger joints is a good way to go. And right
You
here,
can take OSB or plywood and laminate that with liquid nails in between your boards. And when it's screwed together, it's really strong.
another option, another suggestion is using plywood. You got all kinds of ideas, Rodney.
2x plywood, 2x plywood, 2x. You can stack them up.
Mhm.
It's really strong.
Cool, thank you.
I've got like 5 different projects I'm working on, so sometimes I try not to go, big budget on some anyway. So.
Mhm.
Anybody else with questions?
Yes,
How long is the wait list? Like if we wanted to build something, like how far out would it be?
Typically, you're not waiting on us. So just for reference, typically what's going to happen is
speak up for the online.
typically what's going to happen is we're going to help you design, meaning we're literally helping you design. We're coming up with ideas that work for you guys, and we're getting a plan. How far along are you on your blueprint? Do you have a blueprint? Are we supplying your blueprint? Those are all questions. The other thing is engineering takes typically 6 to 8 weeks, and then applying for your permit. Once you've applied for your permit, depending on which permitting department you're dealing with, that could take 6 months. I've heard King County is at 1.5 years. I mean, there's some crazy times out there. So your local building department is probably the biggest question mark.
And that's where, so there's 2 parts to your question. One is what kind of lead time in the design phase, and what kind of lead time in the build phase. The reason Josh's question really addresses the build phase is once things are done, well, we can do that at any time. We've got storage, so there's generally, we can work with a lot of schedules because we have so much time. We can just move the pieces around. As far as the design and that sort of thing,
Typically the design phase can take anywhere between, and don't be scared, anywhere between 2 months and 2 years. This project that we're seeing behind us, I mentioned during the tour, that project has been with us since 2017 or 18. I mean, and mainly because not because the design was taking so long, but there's other factors that can add into this, and most of those factors are with you and not so much with us. So
not our fault.
I heard the 2017 and I'm like, okay, if we wanted to build a house next year, I guess we're not using you. No.
So
okay,
for reference, we have a client that I'm working with right now. He's building up in Clay Elm, and he's building a house. He put his foundation in February. He came to us the week before he put his foundation in. His timbers are cut. He has okayed the pricing on it. His timbers are cut. He okayed his stain color today. We're going to be staining his project next week. It'll deliver the middle of May. So
like this was a motivated person for design, right? In foundation and this, so the decisions are going to be faster. So what's the total of last time? 3 weeks? 4 weeks?
4 weeks maybe, but he's hitting the high points. He's hitting the high points. Most of our clients are not that person, and I'm telling you that right now. Most of our clients are detail oriented, and they want to see the details, and they want to make sure that they're getting what they want. And he was literally hitting the high points. He and his wife were totally excited to be able to get this house, and they're just building. Well, that's not the usual. I'll have you know right now. Not the usual.
Lucas has a few questions as well, but we have one here.
Yeah, I have a question. What do you guys use for mold control on your? I noticed you got some
Mold control. Perfect. You see the mold up there on the
Right.
on the timber right there. So that's, as you see, that sapwood on the outside. So a tree has heartwood in the middle, and then there's a layer of sapwood around the outside. All of the sapwood has sugars in it, and the mold is only going to attach itself to the sapwood. That's a perfect example right there. You can see the sapwood. All of that has been treated already once
Okay.
and cleaned up. It's going to have to be done again because mold is in the air. It's springtime. Mold is going to happen. So that's got to get cleaned up one more time prior to actually staining anything.
Once the stain is on, it generally is good, but it's like if this was June, really starting to get warm, whatever, you don't see that problem. And it goes way into the fall before you start to see the problem.
You asked the question, what do we use for mold control?
Yeah.
We use a product called RMR 86. RMR 86. It's
Oh, yeah,
only
it
available
comes
on
off the
Amazon.
saw. You put it on after it comes right off the saw, and you treat it.
Not necessarily. We treat it before we stain the product. So it's always going to be, we're going to have mold, and we know that it's going to have mold. If we treat it then, we'll be treating it again.
Okay.
So we put it on just before we stain the product, before the final stain goes on. Yes, sir.
Did you guys ever burn your product?
We have, we don't necessarily
for-
recommend it.
For preservation,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
we had one client that did it. We gave him a kit, and the lady at the home did it herself with a torch. And then what they did for this pavilion is they kind of knocked off a loose soot, and then they went and put a lacquer or some sort of something to keep it up so high so that you're not brushing against it and getting a big black. But that's old wood preservative from the Middle Ages, and
It hardens it. It does something to the sugars. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't read up on it lately, but
another natural wood preservative is to do nothing. Believe it or not, that's relatively effective, as long as it's not going to be out in the rain. If it's under a roof,
I'll let you try that on yours.
yeah.
but especially with cedar. Cedar will gray out. You
Cedar, yeah.
You see that at the coast. And,
Yeah. Cedar's
So-
great.
mhm.
Any other questions?
Do you ever build with someone that has timber of their own?
Do we ever build with someone that has timber of their own? Gladly. We do. So it can get a little bit messy depending on the expectations of the owner. If the trees are small, that means we're going to be dealing with boxed heart, and you've been through the tour and understand that, right? So, and then the other piece of it is if there's a lot of knots, where they grow up, do they have a lot of taper? There's a lot of things that go into the quality of a log, and sometimes the savings isn't what people think it's going to be. And if you're thinking of making that decision, my advice to you would be, if it feels right to harvest the timber and use it on your own house, if that speaks to your heart, do it. If not, don't bother. That's kind of the short and sweet.
It's really got to mean a lot to you for it to be worthwhile.
Unless, if you're logging anyway, and you're gonna have equipment there, send us the best of the best. That's perfect. But a lot of times when people ask that, that means they have to hire a logger, hire someone to load the stuff and all that, and it just, all that back and forth eliminates any savings you might have.
In the back.
There's obviously a real coolness factor to not have something like this manufactured, personality, character, all that. rules to really answer this correctly, but you have something like this versus the timber frame, what is the ratio of cost difference? You know, 'cause so much more time invested in hours, personnel you put in.
Are you talking the full timber frame versus hybrid timber frame or conventional framing?
Are you talking about this building right here?
This building right here.
Yeah, so this is basically a pole barn.
Right, so I'm saying if you would have, instead of trussing it as a pole barn, if you would have done it timber frame, what's the cost? I'm just trying, I know there's too many variables.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying like on a, you know, a third more or half.
No, it's
more,
probably
what-
10 times more money to do timber framing.
We purchased
may
this
be-
property,
That may be even low.
we purchased this property with this building here, which, you know, it's not an elegant building, but it's functional. I'll tell you, in this day and age, there's a ton of value. We didn't have to talk to permitting, we didn't have, I mean, all the things ready to use. So it's, I mean, we don't look at this like chopped liver. I mean, it's not elegant, but that was a blessing for us.
Plus it's a billboard.
Right, yeah,
Right there.
billboard right there.
Yeah.
And if we were building from scratch, so if we were building from scratch, to answer your question, you know, we'd have to have a lot of fat years to build a building like this out of timbers.
Something this size, yeah. Our goal eventually is to have a timber frame office on this property over, and I don't know, you guys may not have seen it, but there's a Quonset hut on the far end of the property. And right where the Quonset hut is, that's where the office is going to be. But that's eventually, that's down the road.
Mhm. We got a lot of time to think up cool ideas. We don't have to stop at our first solution.
Yeah.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Lucas, we've got some questions that were presented.
Yeah, a couple via email, and some of them might be a little bit more broad. Maybe you could just point people towards good places to get these.
So Lucas just said that some of these questions that came in through email may be a little bit more broad. So maybe we'll point people in kind of a general direction of where to get more information or steps to take.
So this was kind of just discussed, but like large barn options, timber framing with large barns.
Large barn options, timber frame with large barn options. Yeah, I think we just discussed that. For those online, you can't see the building we're in. It's a pole barn, which is post in the ground, which, by the way, a pole barn doesn't need knee braces. Can anybody answer why? Go ahead. Yep, the pole barn, this is the ground, post goes down, is encapsulated in concrete, and it's basically as if you had a knee brace down here. And it's up there, it's moving around. Mhm.
But we've done hybrid options
So-
on the outside of barns.
So now sometimes, you know, a pole barn is so inexpensive to build that sometimes people want to, you know, what can you do to beautify this? And, you know, using the flexibility, we can do things, and we've successfully done things.
Really, the big question is, they asked, can we do a big pole barn? Or can we do a big timber frame barn? And the answer is yes, but we really don't even know what big means. We've done big barns, and then we've done really big barns. We just recently finished one that was a 30 by 40 timber framed barn, fully timber framed, the whole thing. And yes, it was just a barn, but it was $120,000 for a 30 by 40 timber frame barn. And just for reference, right? That's what the timbers all installed on this client's property. Beautiful barn. Really was a beautiful barn. But how big of a barn is a big barn? I mean, they go, yeah, we can build big barns.
What'd you sheathe it with? What'd you cover it with?
That was all done with TNG, 2x6 TNG.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Man,
It's a beautiful barn.
But the TNG wouldn't be included in that price.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the TNG, we typically don't provide the TNG only because the TNG is something that you can buy from anywhere. And that's something that's typically our clients end up buying that and having their framers who are finishing off the rest of the project, they end up installing it. So, what's the next question?
Like to know the process from bringing in drawings to getting them critiqued and engineered. Do you install or can I install? And as we talked about, how long does the process take?
So the question is, what's the process like?
Yeah.
Do we install? Engineering, is that a problem? Speak up.
So all of that's a great question, first of all. Yes, we certainly can work with your plan, and just like we can start with nothing and we can build a plan for you. Either one works. How long does it take? It really depends on the client. Every client is going to be different. We've got clients that, for instance, in 2021, I had a client that I was working with in July, and by the November 1st, he had finalized the exact house that he wanted to build. It was all done. So from nothing in July to November 1st, he had exactly the house that he wanted. And that wasn't necessarily that we came up with the one plan that right off the bat, the very first time. Oh no, the first one we came up with, we crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage and we started again. And sometimes that's what it takes. This particular time took 3 times to actually come up with a plan that he's gonna like, that's actually gonna fit on his lot, that's gonna check off the boxes that he really
So
likes.
if you guys go into the home design process and you get a plan that doesn't work, that you end up crumpling up and throwing away, don't count it as a loss. Most of us use to some degree a process of elimination. Discovering what you don't want is every bit as valuable as discovering what you do want, and that's part of the journey, right? So the message is exercise patience.
Kind of like when you put a bunch of effort into something that doesn't work, and you got to do it again and make it work.
Yes.
Is the engineering price included in?
Is the engineering price included in our packages? Yes.
Typically, the timber engineering price is included in our package. The house engineering is typically not. That's a separate price. We'll put you in touch with the engineer so that the engineer will bill you directly.
Unless we're providing your whole set of plans, if we're bringing them from scratch.
Even then.
So here's where I'm at. I called the guy that's doing our plans and I said, I don't want you to do the engineering on the timber piece. He goes, oh no, you gotta have it done now. I said, I will get back with you after I do my seminar. I said, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, what happens with that generally is your engineer will be the engineer of record. Our engineer is used to how we do things. So a new engineer a lot of times will mandate weird things and expensive things for us, and it just doesn't work as well. So then we submit our engineer, we give you our engineering, you give it to your engineer, he reviews it, he stamps it as the engineer of record. And most engineers prefer that. They don't want to start learning the value of oak peg and all the nuances of timber framing.
We just went through this on a project in Sun River where the client absolutely loved our design, but had an engineer that he'd been working with as his engineer of record and wanted his engineer of record to do all of the engineering. Against my better judgment, I allowed it to happen. And what ended up happening is the engineering ended up being just ridiculous because this engineer that he was using in Bend or Redmond or wherever it was had no clue as to what kind of joinery this was that we're providing. Even though we had detailed joinery, he wasn't using any of that joinery for any structure. He was basically saying the joinery was nothing and that you have to use all this metal and all this Simpson crap that he wanted to put in.
Well, that's what he's used to. And you get new software or whatever, you kind of don't want to stop and learn. You want to just do what you know, right? Down the old familiar groove. And that's what happened here.
That's exactly that's what can happen. And that kind of thing actually added about 3 weeks to the time it took for this guy to provide an engineering package for the timbers. Were there any other
Last question is just where can someone learn about chisels, slicks, useful tools, how to use them, proper way to sharpen?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. So chisels and slicks, there is a difference between a chisel and a slick. Anyone know what that is?
Chisel, you hit it.
Chisel, you can hit it, and a slick is made to be used without a mallet.
And it's like a big shovel, or like a mid-sized shovel. You can really get your body into it.
You basically use the weight of the slick for the momentum, and the momentum of the slick will actually go through the wood. Whereas a chisel is used with a mallet and to go through the wood.
The sharpening is, don't ask me, I never really learned how to sharpen super well. I had more talented, patient people myself. Hey, quit sharpening my chisel.
Really, what we found is that sharpening by hand is a something that really takes years and years to learn. Rather than sharpening by hand, we actually bought a tool that does it for us. And really what it does is it provides a razor finish on that thing. The actual cutting edge is mirrored, so you can see your face in the cutting edge, and it's really nice. A leather strop, it's all part of it, all part of the system. It sharpens these things. So, I mean, that chisel is as sharp enough to shave with. I mean, if you ever did that.
And it provides consistency.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you guys know what the difference is between a knife or a chisel that is sharp and one that is really sharp? No. When you use it, when you shave test it out, if it's really sharp, instead of the hair is falling limply over, boink. They jump. Because the tension, they jump up.
That. Okay.
17 minutes to sharpen a little tiny chisel
Is that what it is? By hand.
by hand. You start out with 2,000 grit sandpaper,
Mm-hmm.
wet and dry.
Okay, here, I'm gonna just repeat that. So 17 minutes to sharpen a chisel that's, a half inch wide. It started out with 17 grit
2,000 grit,
2,000 grit sandpaper to start out with.
go to 3,000.
Go to 3,000
8,000 grit.
and step up to about 8,000 grit.
And you go 10 strokes, turn the chisel over on the back. and
Okay.
have a feather.
Yeah. So 10 strokes on the face and 10 strokes on the back face.
And you do that, and then you start out, you go 10, 9, 9, 8, 8.
As you work up in grit.
Yep.
Okay, so it's a descending rep scheme as you work the grit up. So yeah, you might want to invest in a sharpener. For us anyway, yeah.
Why don't we say goodbye to the online audience and then do the raffle?
Okay, so thank you, online audience. We're going to do the raffle for the book. And then if you have any other questions or want to mill around and talk, that's great. We do have one member, Kevin Smith. Stand up. Yeah, so he is specialized in construction loans, and especially loans that require an advance before the building materials on site. And he happened to be coming here, so since he's a loan guy that does that, and like this here, generally people are pulling out of their own checkbook to fund it till they get it on site and the bank will release funds. Kevin has a different process. If you're interested in that, look him up.